Imagine murdering a ruler and then deciding the best possible move is to ask his widow to marry you. Not only that, you send a group of your most important men directly to her home to deliver the proposal. Surely nothing could go wrong. Unfortunately for the Drevlians, the widow they were dealing with was Olga of Kiev. And according to the story, they would later be recorded in the primary chronicle. Olga didn't simply reject their proposal. She embarked on one of the most elaborate revenge campaigns in medieval history. A campaign involving men buried alive, a burning bathhouse, a massacre at a funeral feast, and supposedly an entire city destroyed with the help of pigeons. And somehow, after all of this, Olga became a saint. Welcome back to Mealstounalivefor, the podcast where true crime, dark history, conspiracy, and food collide. I'm your host, Jody Breton, and every week we serve up the stories that are as disturbing as they are fascinating, paired with a meal inspired by the chaos. So grab a plate, lock your doors, and let's dig in. Today we'll be making lavender cupcakes with a boysenberry filling. Olga lived during the 10th century and was married to Igor of Kiev, ruler of the Kievan Rus. Kiev stretching across parts of what are now Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Igor ruled by collecting tribute from the different tribes under his control. And in 945, he went to collect tribute from a Slavic tribe known as the Drevlians. Apparently, Igor wasn't satisfied with what he'd received. According to the primary chronicle, after collecting tribute and beginning his journey home, Igor decided he wanted more. He sent most of his men ahead, turning around with a smaller group, and went back to demand additional payment. The Drevlians had had enough. They captured Igor, and according to a later account by the Byzantine historian Leo the Deacon, they killed him in an absolutely horrific way. Igor was allegedly tied between two bent trees. The trees were then released, and Igor was torn apart. Whether that exact method of execution actually happened is debated, but one thing is certain: Igor was dead, which left his wife Olga widowed with their young son Sviatoslav. And the Drevlians apparently saw an opportunity. Their leader, Prince Mal, decided that since he'd helped eliminate Olga's husband, perhaps he could simply take his place. So the Drevlians simply sent around 20 representatives to Olga. Their message was essentially, your husband is dead, our prince is better, marry him. Olga listened, and surprisingly, she told them their proposal pleased her. She even offered them a great honor. She told the men to return to their boat and wait. The next day, Olga's people would carry them, still sitting inside their boat, into the city as a grand display of respect. The Drevlians apparently thought this sounded fantastic. So the next morning they dressed in their finest clothing, climbed into their boat, and allowed Olga's men to carry them towards her court. What they didn't know was that Olga had ordered a massive trench to be dug. The men were carried directly to it, boat and all, and dumped inside. Olga reportedly leaned over the pit and asked them something along the lines of, "Do you find the honor to your taste?" Then she ordered them buried alive. And that was only round one. Olga sent a message back to the Drevlians saying that if they truly wanted her to marry Prince Mal, they needed to send their most distinguished and powerful men to escort her. Otherwise, her people would never accept the marriage. So the Drevlians did exactly that. They sent another delegation. When the men arrived, Olga welcomed them warmly and offered them the opportunity to bathe before meeting her. The bathhouse was prepared. The men entered, the doors were locked behind them, and Olga ordered the entire building set on fire. According to the chronicle, every man inside burned to death. At this point, you might assume the Drevlians would realize something was wrong. But Olga wasn't finished. She contacted them again. This time she said she wanted to travel to the place where Igor had been killed and hold a proper funeral feast for her husband. The Drevlians agreed. They prepared enormous amounts of mead. Olga arrived with her followers, and they mourned Igor and held the feast. Olga encouraged the Drevlians to drink heavily. Once they were intoxicated, Olga gave her soldiers the signal. the massacre began. The primary chronicle claimed around 5,000 Drevlians were killed. That number may very well be exaggerated. Medieval chroniclers weren't exactly known for conservative storytelling. But the message of the story is unmistakable. Olga was systematically destroying the people responsible for her husband's death, and there was still one final act. Olga's army eventually besieged the Drevlian city of Ishkostin, the place associated with Igor's murder. But the city resisted for months, so Olga offered them peace, and her terms seemed suspiciously generous. She didn't demand gold or silver. Instead, she supposedly asked every household to give her 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows. The people agreed. After all, birds were a pretty small price to pay to end a siege. They gathered the birds and handed them over. Olga then allegedly ordered her soldiers to attach small pieces of burning material, often described as sulfur and cloth, to each bird. Then they released them. The birds did exactly what birds naturally do. They flew home into nests, under rooftops, inside barns, and throughout the city. And suddenly, fires supposedly erupted everywhere at once. People fled the burning city. Olga's forces were waiting outside. Some were killed, some were captured, and the survivors were forced to pay tribute. Now, historians seriously question whether Olga actually destroyed a city using pigeons. Similar stories about animals being used to carry fire appear elsewhere in ancient and medieval literature. So this part of Olga's story may be legend. But what happened afterward is historically significant, because Olga didn't simply take revenge and disappear. She ruled. Since her son was still young, Olga became regent of the Kievan Rus. And ironically, one of her most important accomplishments was reforming the exact system that had contributed to her husband's death: tribute collection. Instead of rulers traveling around personally demanding whatever they believed they were owed, Olga established more organized collections, centers, and standardized payments. Essentially, she helped create a more structured system of taxation and administration. And then Olga's story takes another unexpected turn. She converted to Christianity. Olga was baptized sometime in the mid-10th century, likely taking the Christian name Helena. She attempted to encourage Christianity within the Kievan Rus, although her son remained pagan. Her grandson, Vladimir the Great, would later convert and oversee the Christianization of the Kievan Rus in 988. Because of Olga's early conversion and influence, she eventually became recognized as a saint. The Eastern Orthodox Church honors her as Saint Olga, and she is considered equal to the apostles for her role in spreading Christianity. Which means Olga of Kiev somehow has one of the strangest historical reputations imaginable. According to medieval legend, she buried diplomats alive, burned another group alive in a bathhouse, orchestrated a massacre at her husband's funeral feast, and may or may not have weaponized pigeons to burn down an entire city. Then she reformed government administration, converted to Christianity, and became a saint. The most dramatic details of Olga's revenge were written down generations after she lived, so we can't know exactly where history ends and legends begin, but perhaps that's part of why her story has survived for more than 1,000 years. Because whether every gruesome detail is true or not, the woman at the center of the legend was very real. Olga inherited a politically dangerous situation after her husband's murder. She maintained control. She defeated opposition. She strengthened the state her son would eventually inherit. If you murder someone's husband, maybe don't immediately send 20 of your friends and ask her to marry you, because she might already be digging the hole.